Let's talk about the front of the guitar. Front of the guitar is almost perfectly flat, where the back has curvature both this way, the long way, as well as side to side. So what that means is when the router is traveling around, in some places it's sitting at a bit of an angle. So the thickness that it actually takes off in one area may be greater than what it is in some other areas. So what I like to see folks do is take a small piece of the binding and just cut off a small piece. And with that small piece, run that all the way around the perimeter of the guitar. And if that piece sticks way out because the channel isn't as deep, the problem you'll have is when you go to scrape this thickness will become almost transparent. You'll scrape too much, it'll become too thin, and it won't look good. And ultimately what you're looking for is for that binding thickness to be the same all the way around. It's a nice finished detail, and if it starts thick here and then it gets thin and through here and then gets thicker, there's a tale that something's not quite right. So in order to fix that, first thing you have to do is find, by really sighting this way into the guitar, and I can see right here that there's a section just right in through here that's not quite as deep. So what I do is take a card scraper with a moderate burr to it, stick it into that channel, and I scrape. And by scraping this, taking your time, get real aggressive, and then taking some hand sandpaper, you can follow that channel, smooth it out. You can get that depth in that area consistent with the rest of the areas that for the most part are correct. They're at the correct depth and where you need it to be. But take the time to really look this through thoroughly on your guitar before you go ahead and lay out your tape and get your glue and just start binding away. This finished detail really makes all the difference in the world to having a nice looking binding job. So kind of a couple of telltale places are right in through this section. May need a little bit of work, and very often in the waist area. This is called the waist of the body. So a little bit of work in that area to deepen those. And just take your time. And then also another telltale spot is typically in through here. This one actually doesn't look too bad as I look at it, but it's a typical area. The top you don't really have that issue with, again, because you're on the router's sitting flat from the get-go. So that's not really an issue. So take your time on the back, get it all prepped, and our next step will be to glue on the binding and the purfling. The two binding strips need a little bit of prep work before you glue them on. And you'll notice that on the binding strip, the wider piece, which on the Sapele is white, and on the Sycamore kit this is black as the larger primary piece. On the thin strip, which on the Sapele is black and on the Sycamore is white, that piece, if you feel it, is not flush when they glue that on. So what you need to do to make sure that that sits nice and flat in the channel is to just go ahead and scrape that thin piece so it becomes flush. And you'll notice the only thing I'm scraping at this point is black. So it's just that thin strip. So I'll just do a little bit of scraping work to get that ready to go. Now before you get going with your glue, you want to take several blue strips of tape and just attach them to the front of your bench. Okay, at this point we're pretty much ready to glue on. 1 tube of the Duco cement is pretty much enough to do both the top and the back with a little bit left over. So in order to get going here, you want to pick a side and basically just put a nice bead. Takes a little bit just to get it started. There we go. We'll put a nice bead in here. Not too much. If a little bit drips on the side, it's not a problem. That will scrape right off. It's pretty soft. So we want to make sure that we have a contrasting stripe, which would be the black against the white. So we'll set this in, trying to get a little bit of glue between each one of the layers. Once you have all of the layers, a small piece of tape, and really pull that so that that binding stays on. And then at this point, if you take your fingers and you run all of the pieces through your fingers nice and tight, you'll make sure that you end up with all of the binding strips alternated, black, white, with the white piece of binding on the outside. And that's it. We'll just proceed all the way around the guitar until we come to the end. Take a few minutes. It is nice if you have a second set of hands to hold this a little bit higher so that as you pull this around, you can really kind of push all of this in. And this technique works very well to get everything to lay in so that you do end up with black, white. Okay, the back is very easy because you're only doing the binding. So I've gone all the way around the perimeter. And when I got started, I just did a simple cut, a 90-degree cut. And now I've got this piece that I want to butt right up against it. There's no need to do an intricate scarf joint here. All you need is a simple butt joint. And the reason for that is when we go to scrape some of this material, we can take that, mix it in with a little bit of acetone, and that binding material will melt to almost a paint, which you can basically just paint right over that joint. And once that dries and you sand it, you'll never see the joint. So the easiest way at this point, we're at that last little bit that we need to trim in. I like to basically just take a card scraper and slip this right in so I can still see where exactly that joint is. And then I'll take a chisel and I'll find that perfect spot where it's going to create a nice joint. And at this point, I'm just going to rock that chisel back and forth. You see that fits perfect. So I'll put a little bit of more glue. Another piece of tape. Pull it nice and tight, and that'll finish it up.